Hello, everyone. My name is Lewis Smith, and I'm here with Bradley Berman and Chris Metzler, the directors and the producer of Jack Has a Plan. How are you guys doing?
Thanks for having us, Lewis. Great to connect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you so much. It's good to be with you.
What do you think was like the biggest inspiration behind the entire project?
I guess I should answer. It was inspired by my friend Jack. He's the main character of the film, but also he's the instigator. He's the one that wanted this to happen. So it's kind of a unique thing. Like, documentary filmmakers usually have to convince their subjects that it's a cool thing to be. And this dude was like begging me for years to like make a film about me. So that comes with all kinds of it. But that was the inspiration. He wanted his story told.
What took? Because I'm sure it took a little bit to convince you. Like, what was the thing that he did that convinced you to do the documentary?
Persistence, just badgering, never like, come on, let's just these projects, can sometimes you have to convince yourself to do them, but because that they don't happen overnight. But Jack just after a certain amount of time said, come on, just one day, just shoot one day. And so that's what convinced me, was just, it's low stakes. This is not going to be a project. This is not going to take years. I'll just pick up the camera and we'll shoot one day and see what happens.
And then it just
Well, and one of the,
oh, sorry, go.
well, I was going to say, one of the things that Brad had told me early on, so Brad and I have been friends for a while. We'd worked together on an earlier film of his. Is just like, look, I'm just out there doing this thing with my friend. What do you think about them? And they were humorous and a little bit quirky and cool, but they were really to kind of entertain Jack and his friends. And then later on, as he continued to do it, you see this in the film, is like, Bradley sees what this is becoming, and has these kind of heart-to-heart moments with Jack, even in the film, of just like, okay, do we really want to be doing this? Because I want you to just kind of keep on living life. But the creative soul that Jack was, this is a way for Brad and him to get in some hijinks and maybe discuss some things that they wouldn't have talked about without the kind of camera being there as a catalyst for things, it seems.
Yeah. My professor actually asked me to ask you this. He sent me an email saying to ask you about the skull that you sent the school or sent him.
Well, we'll go on a little tangent here. So I'm actually an alumni of the film festival. I brought a film that I had directed and produced, Rodents of Unusual Size, back in 2017 or 2018. And so it was fun. And so then last year, you guys were doing a fundraiser for the festival. Maybe it was the fundraiser for this one that actually comes now. And so we sent a signed poster, and we sent a skull, a Nutria skull, for whoever was winning the auction of different alumni aspects. So somebody out there, maybe somebody attending the festival this year, it was a proud winner of a Nutria skull with its big orange teeth.
That's pretty cool. There's another film that like kind of reminded me a little bit of this, and I wanted to ask you guys what the director said. It was about him making a documentary about his dad dying, and like kind of going over his grief with a camera they shared. And he said that a big thing that helped him go through a lot of the grief was the film. And I'm curious, is the same for you guys? Like, did filming this and like going through that process help you deal with your friends sadly dead?
Out of curiosity, what was the name? Do you remember the name of the film?
Yes, it was a relationship with a camera by Troy King or Tony King.
Do you know that one, Chris?
I feel like I've heard the name, but I don't know if it's from some other things. But we'd love to be introduced. So, hey, Troy, if you're watching this Q&A, given some of the kind of shared affections for storytelling, it'd be great to kind of hear what you're up to.
Yeah, and to answer your question, Lewis, when I first approached Chris with this, one of the first questions you asked, I don't know if you remember it, Chris, you said, like, was this experience cathartic for me? Right?
Yes, I do remember that because, I'd been aware that Brad was kind of editing kind of short videos over time, like we'll call them webisodes,
Mm-hmm.
and then when the pandemic hit, I think it kind of, gave you a little bit of time, and you were thinking about, you've been working on crafting like a first cut of stuff. And yeah, that was like one of my, kind of questions is like, was it, I was kind of curious what had caused you to kind of dig back in, I think, at that moment. Because obviously there's a lot of, Jack had passed maybe a year before. And then of course the pandemic had hit, and that kind of brings its own, owns types of reflection to things. What was your answer at that time, Brad? I can't even remember.
I don't even know if I thought about it as much, because I probably said, yeah, it is cathartic, but I was still like, it's different. Like it's, the stages of grief that people talk about, but now we've shown this film like, I don't know, 25 times, and that's a whole nother part of the entire, experience is actually shaping it. But, I feel like maybe we could turn this into a bit like a business, a psychological grieving business. Do you want to deal with, how do you deal with your grieving? Make a movie about it. We'll help you, and you can get over your grieving. It's the weirdest thing ever. I mean, like, I'm sure people that are grieving look through photos of their lost family member, or they look at some videos. And I even shot stuff of my dad, like a couple of years before he passed, and it's a cherished piece of media for my whole family, this interview, because there's, people want to have a recording of their family member, like especially as their family members kind of get older, get up in age, they're like, why didn't we record them?
And I think it's an interesting one, because I mean, so many of us kind of consider of like, sometimes you live life, and then others of us, we get caught up in documenting. It's like, how do you find that balance, I guess? You were talking about like, back when you were documenting some of your dad in his later years.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a long tradition, isn't there, like of photographing. I remember in the history of photography, there was a long tradition of, when there's an open casket, you photograph the person in the casket. Like, how do you memorialize somebody? That's the question.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it was a long process of reviewing all these conversations I had with Jack over years, and with Chris's help and our hotshot, Cracker Jack editorial team of Quinn Costello and Byron Thompson. Like, how do you reckon with the memory of someone who's passed? And does that, the grieving is part of it, but I think it's really super helpful to try to say, okay, how do we make a cogent, interesting story based on that?
Yeah.
And I think I remember even conversations that Brad and I had at different points in time where it's like, Brad was in it this to the end, but there were times where it's just like, why in the hell am I doing this? It's like, you would turn a corner and the film would develop in some cool ways, but you just realized that you still had a few more miles to kind of run, and, it was based on his kind of, obligation to Jack, but also I think the creativity he saw there, that he knew in the end there was a film that would kind of resonate with people. But one of the biggest challenges for any sort of documentary is like, who's your audience, right? And when you're so closely attenuated to, the subject of the film, it's just like, okay, how much do you share and still know you'll be able to keep an audience engaged that's just meeting Jack, Because in the end, it's like, I mean, it's amazing. Like, I mean, Jack lived a long, fulfilling life, right? And we're shoving his story into 66 minutes and giving other people voices in it, And so it's an impression of, an abstract portrait of it. And I think in the end, we always hoped it's like, did Jack's personality and his approach to life come through? And then with it, there's kind of a narrative shaped on there.
That actually goes into my next question, is because like from doing a bit of documentary projects myself, I know that you have a crap ton of footage. Like, was it really hard trying to condense all the stuff that you filmed throughout these years just into the 60? Like, how did you go about condensing that, really?
Well, it's it's an editorial process, right? Like, let's say we had 60 or 70 hours of footage, then you're like choosing selected takes and scenes that you like, and then you're trying to find the right, sequence of those that make the most sense. And then, the way this particular project worked, I kind of worked solo for almost a year and weeding out a lot of stuff, and then finally presenting it to Chris and Quinn. And then they were the ones that were able to say, like, this entire scene, like the entire relationship of Jack and his dog, which I thought was so important. Like, no, like he hung out with his dog a lot. That's so, and they were like, dude, like, that's just, that's not quite moving our story forward. So it's a collaborative process. And so my emotions were all wrapped up into it. I was dealing with the grieving process, and then they were able to reflect back and say, no, we're trying to tell a story, and is that what you want? I'm like, yeah, I want to make it relevant for people. So what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it definitely was hard to narrow the story down, because in the end, it's like everything you shave off, right? You feel like you're cutting off a piece that's important to the person, and I think that's, even for myself, I mean, I didn't know Jack. I got a chance to know Jack through footage. Is that he felt, I knew how important he was to Brad, and it was really hard to like we want him to be a three-dimensional character, right? But at the same time, it's like when you're cutting off different pieces, you're just like, it felt like you're doing this to a human being, and so usually the stories that I make, that I direct, are more ensemble pieces, so it's not like it's one character portrait. And so that was an interesting challenge to me of, like, I don't know, staying true to that one person, because you feel like you have this obligation. I mean, they're not just a paper doll,
Yeah.
casting in a film in that way.
What do you think, for like either of you? I'm just gonna ask like a question for both of you to answer. Is like, what do you think is the biggest, like, or the most difficult aspect through the entire project? Like, what do you think was the most difficult to do?
What was the most difficult? God, it's all difficult, but
so this one's maybe not the kind of tailor-made develop, but that last act of the film, where we know that Jack is on the final process of his journey, I think that was hard because it's emotional to see, and you're having to keep on reliving it. But also, it's a hard one to figure out what the balance is, right? And I think it's just more of like, how much are we going to show, And so that was I think the film turned out really great as it is, but I don't think until we started seeing it with audiences did we really know whether we had made the right decision or not.
Yeah, and to add to that, I'd say, if you just read the log line, it sounds like people say, "Oh, heavy, heavy," and Jack was so jovial and friendly and upbeat and funny that the challenge was to convey the big consequences of his decisions while still keeping the spirit of it alive, right? Like, how much humor do you introduce? When is it okay to laugh about a very serious thing like death and dying? How to find that right balance and put all the pieces together so it's a exciting, dramatic, suspenseful story that has that spirit, but still does the right thing in terms of saying there's an important thing that's happening here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember one of the things that as we were weaving parts of the story together is that, how do you get it so you're telling all the different parties involved, whether it be Jack or his wife Jen or his friends or Brad, because in some ways it's a very kind of a very subtle Rashomon effect. If everybody's seen it from a different way, and they all have stakes in it because of their own lives and their care for Jack, but also, so it was all about finding that balance too, because it's like, as human beings, we are trying to do what we can best for ourselves, but like, there are times where it's just like, oh well, out of context, Jack is going to look really selfish in this way, and it's like, okay, well, was that really a selfish decision, or is it just appearing basic because we pared it down too far? And so sometimes it was finding that right balance of not leaving too much in or too little, so that the context changed substantially from what the real situation was.
Yeah.
And also, so much of the material was just a conversation, right? Like whether it was in person, him explaining his, what's going on in his life, or through FaceTime. And so, that could get boring visually, right? Like, how much can you just, how much do you get sick of them? How do you, you guys, the team did a really amazing job of kind of having just as much as we needed of his face filling the screen, and then bringing in other material to balance it out.
Yeah. What do you think is, like, for either of you, the key takeaway that you want the project to, like, bring to people? Like, what do you think people should take away from the project the most?
It's a good question. I think it's probably different for each of us, but I think just me personally, because I have things at stake, because I just kind of appreciate the kind of craft of filmmaking, and of course want to support my friend Brad, but in regards to when it comes to Jack, I think to me, I just think it demonstrates the importance of having conversations, right? It's in having options, It's not a binary system of like, this is good or this is bad, right? But that we all just need to, in even our most difficult times, be able to talk with our friends and family about what's important. And through that conversation, hopefully you come up with, a way that you want to kind of live life, and also, choose your own death too.
Yeah, and I would say there was a devotion to having Jack have his proper legacy, and I think he's a unique person. And one of the most unique things about him is his sense of gratitude. Like, all of us complain about the smallest things in our lives all the time. I'm totally guilty of that. And he is facing his demise, and he's upbeat and showing nothing but gratitude and love for all the people around him. And I think that's ultimately the message that people are carrying, like that they're getting when they're watching the movie. I mean, it's sad and it's happy and it's funny, and they're crying and laughing and cheering and whatever in the theater. But at the end, they're just trying to take away this message, not heavy-handed, but just like, wow, this guy shows us how we can feel grateful for everything in our lives, no matter how long or short that life is.
Yeah. What this is again a question for like kind of the both of you, since it's a bit more of a personal question, but like, what do you think is going to be the moment that you're always excited for people to see, like the wow moment that makes them kind of go like whoa, if that makes sense, like that makes their faces light up while they're watching.
Scene in the movie?
Yeah.
You go first, Chris.
So I think there's a couple moments, but I think the wow moment for me, happens in duplicate in some ways. So we open the film up on Jack's last day, and the kind of a conversation that he and Brad are having together, and then we revisit that conversation at the very end of the film. And now that you've kind of gone through the film, you have different context for how you take that information. And so I think the opening is kind of an oh wow moment. And it's one that then in reflection, the way that you interpret it changes because of the journey you've made into the film. And so I think that bathroom scene has always been, as a standalone, pretty amazing, just for the intimacy that it captures and what it kind of, shares. But then also within the context of the film, I think it takes on this big meaning. So yeah, I think that would be our oh wow moment, because what's at stake.
Yeah, I mean, he's being filmed 20 minutes before he's leaving this world. Mm-hmm. Like, that's pretty powerful. And I'd also say the moment that, without any spoilers, like, he knows his time is limited, and he makes an effort to see his mom that he hasn't seen in 25 years. and he goes up to the door and rings the bell without advance notice for her, and so this is his chance to reconcile with his mom, who was, was very problematic, and seeing how, seeing how he dealt with what happened is something that, you're privy to a human experience that very few of us can bear witness, that can experience, right? Can bear witness to. And now through the documentary, which is what documentaries should do, is show you something you haven't seen before.
Yeah. What are you the most, I would say, proud of for the, what part of the film are you, gives you the most pride, would you say?
Well, I mean, that we finished it, right? I mean, making a film is, not easy, let alone a feature film. And so I think, it's, so I don't think that when we watch the film now that it's complete, that there's anything where we're things don't necessarily stand out to you in the same way. I mean, in the editorial process, there's things you fall in love with and you're like, oh, that really helps the story out. And maybe it was exciting because that part of the story was really challenging for a while and we just didn't really know how it was going to be solved. And so now that it's this complete package, it's just more of okay, it's neat that it crossed the finish line. And it's really, I think most proud is that, and Brad's got a chance to travel around with the film, quite a bit. It's just that the interaction with the people afterwards, and I think that's the truth for any film, because by then it's this film has kind of been birthed into the world, and you've raised it, and now it's like the kid that went off to college and graduated. And so now it's after the screening, it's you have this adult kid that's out there, that people are oh, you have such a nice child, it's so I think that's the part that, for me personally.
And I would say it's a pride, not just for myself, but for all of this whole team that collaborated on it, was just how tight it is. Films can often, there's a certain point where you're looking at your clock, how much longer? I see audiences' reactions. There's not a moment, from what I can gather, where there's not excess. It moves. It plays almost like a dramatic film in terms of one scene leading to the next, and people are on the edge of their seats. So I credit everyone who worked on it, but sometimes that works out and it's magic. There's little magical moments that happen, and sometimes it doesn't, and we just got lucky with this one. I think that there's a real dramatic feel to it.
What hold on, I'm blanking, sorry. What what did he, because I know you said that it was his idea and him to convince you stuff, what gave him the idea to do this? What made him want to do this?
Oh, I'm interested in the answer to this answer.
Yeah. He sort of was a natural entertainer. The way I would say it is, he's like a celebrity, but he didn't do anything to deserve being a celebrity except just his personality. He liked getting attention. So he was kind of an entertainer and a musician and a performer in a formal sense when he was younger, and then afterwards, through he used to call himself, I'm a brain tumor guy. He loved the attention that his brain tumor gave him, and he wanted to talk about it. So I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you have any, either of you have any upcoming projects that you want others to know about or anything like that?
I think, at least for myself, there's a lot of kind of projects on the, on the stovetop scene, how they kind of cook up, just given the audience for the festival. I think the thing to kind of just realize is like, as filmmakers, often we're kind of juggling a few different balls in the sense of like, there's these kind of more independent projects like we're doing here with Jack Has a Plan. And then there's the projects that we do that are kind of like more client or commission based,
Mm-hmm.
So, so I do a lot of collaborations with companies and nonprofits and things. And Brad's a writer and kind of tells a lot of stories that way. And so these, feature films, they just take so long that you want to make sure that like, halfway through it, you're still in love with the project in some ways. It doesn't make it any less difficult, but it's that like initial passion that you want to carry over. And so I don't know if I personally found one that's ready for that journey yet, or that marriage, but we're getting close.
Yeah, you're juggling a bunch of stuff, but there's a duty to see Jack Has a Plan get out there properly and get distributed and get used by, get seen by as many people as possible. So, you have an idea to start with and you're shooting and you think you're done, but then you have to edit, and then you edit and you think you're done, and you have to like sort of expose it to the world. And then even when a few people see it, you're still not done. So it could be years of work. This project is not over. And anybody that checks it out through the festival and is interested in bringing it to their neck of the woods, please reach out and let us know, at jackdocumentary.com so we can continue to hit the road with this movie.
Was it challenging trying to find all like the festivals to like bring it to, or like to show it around, or like how did you go about that process?
To answer your question, and this just want to having done quite a few films over the years and kind of having to utilize the film festival circuit for discovery and I think audience engagement, you're kind of always building on the successes of previous films. And so I think the most challenging part is just, particularly coming out of the pandemic, is just not so much of like adjusting to kind of how the things in the festival world have changed, whether it be, having hybrid screenings with virtual stuff, or festivals that you love for a long time, closing up shop and not being around. And you're just like, oh, I was really looking forward to going to that festival, And I think, we're, great. We know how challenging it is to kind of keep a film festival alive. And, there's some festivals that had to kind of cut the number of films that they've programmed, like they're screening 50% less than they were pre-pandemic, and that just makes it so much more competitive to kind of get slots like these in the festival. And so we kind of try to practice the kind of gratitude that Brad spoke of Jack had, in the sense that like, even when we get a rejection, it can be disappointing, but like, heck, we've gotten into like 25 or 30 film festivals so far in the last, 8 months, 9 months. And like, that's just something that we're really thankful for, because we know that there are other many talented and cool films out there that haven't had that same opportunity.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything that you want to plug if they really like Jack Has a Plan, or any like to go see more of your stuff, or just even the Jack Has a Plan like thing, like a YouTube link or website? Or
so I guess I'd say, so there's the website Jack Documentary that Brad had mentioned, where he's using for kind of outreach and engagement to kind of be able to get the film brought to other communities. That can even be, different nurses and doctors that are kind of dealing with end-of-life issues. Then, I have a couple of, films I've done in the past. If you like quirky films, that seems to be my vein. And so if you go to Tilapia, TILAPIA film.com, you check the documentary section, you can see some of that. But I think the thing, if I was, selfishly, it's like we want people to spread the word about Jack Has a Plan. Mm-hmm. But with that said, just continue to support film festivals like these. And so, like, if this is the only film you've seen, try to come back and see one more film during the festival, or at least come back next year. Because I think that's the kind of sustaining blood of like independent filmmaking. Because if festivals didn't exist, we wouldn't really have an audience.
Yeah, gotta support each other.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I really appreciate you doing this with us.
Thank you for joining.
Yeah, big time thanks to South Georgia Film Festival for including Jack's story in the lineup.
Yeah.
It's venues like this that are just so important for independent films, and keep up the great stuff. And and we're just so happy to be a part of it.